Hey friends, Kevin here. Thank you so much to everyone who liked and commented on and shared the reflections on Slow Kids. I wanted to share another song. This one's actually off of the first album. Eucharistia is a song written from the perspective of Jesus, and at the time I wrote this, I was really reflecting on the life of Christ, and it was the first time in my life I had given myself permission to completely take a beginner's mind to the whole book and really just forget everything I had heard about what other people thought about it and just read the book, the story myself. And so what I started doing was empathizing with all of the characters in the Bible. And as I did that, I realized the core message of the gospel for me, it's actually more about the transformation of the disciples from pre-crucifixion consciousness to post-resurrection consciousness. The first line of the song, it refers to the time when Jesus is in Gethsemane. This is a garden, and he was about to get called to his death. The people who were going to kill him were going to come and take him away. And he's praying in the garden through the night. He asks the disciples to remain awake. They keep falling asleep on him. And then all of a sudden these people come up and they want to take Jesus away. And then Peter pulls out a knife, and Peter strikes one of the guards. And Jesus immediately rebukes Peter and heals the guy's ear and goes with them. And in that moment, we see two different modes of being. One is in complete acceptance of the circumstance of his life, as in the case of Jesus. And then one is utter resistance. And the reason that Peter has resistance in this moment is not his fault alone. Peter had a very clear idea of what a Messiah is, because he was born into this Jewish worldview in which they were looking for the next conqueror. So, for the 1,000 years that preceded Jesus, this tradition was writing and documenting its history because they believed they were the chosen people. They thought ultimately a Messiah would come out of their lineage that would take the Israelites to a place of supreme power on the earth. And so Peter is like holding on to this vision as a Jew, and Jesus walks into his life and he sells everything he has to follow Jesus. Peter and the disciples, for the most part, believed that Jesus was going to conquer the world by force. That's my interpretation. So that's why Peter pulls out the knife in Gethsemane. It's also the reason that Peter rebukes Jesus when Jesus tells him he's going to die, right? Jesus says, "I have to die." Peter says, "No, you're the Messiah." That would be ridiculous, because in his mind, the Messiah was a figure who was elevated, who was going to bring the Israelites into power. Imagine the day when Jesus dies. What is Peter thinking? Well, he was following this man very devoutly. He wandered after him through the wilderness, right? And then, boom, he's killed, right? So you have to imagine the shock. It's like, oh my gosh, everything they believed in, they sold their prior lives, they gave up their livelihoods and followed Jesus, and now he's dead, right? Everything they believed in is lost. And you have to get into that consciousness. You have to get into that dark night of the soul moment when the disciples lose everything they believed in. You have to get into that for the resurrection to make sense. So, what happens in the resurrection? Well, Jesus arrives as a stranger. Now, why is he a stranger? Well, you can imagine. The disciples, everyone who knew Jesus, was so distraught. Their reason for being with God was at least a large part their expectations about what God would provide them in life. When Jesus rises from the grave, they realized how foolish they had been to objectify their relationship with Jesus instead of just loving him and instead of just focusing and knowing him. There is one character that really empathized and loved him in a way that I think was really radical, and that's Mary. It doesn't surprise me that she was the first one in some of the resurrection accounts to recognize Jesus. And so the disciples went from this consciousness of pre-crucifixion, this instrumentalization of God, turning God into an instrument, a tool, a means to an end, right? And then through this deep emotional, inner, full-bodied, grief to the bone experience, what was burned away was all of this idolization of God, and what remained was this pure love. In His grace, God has really revealed to me the futility of walking down this path towards self-concern and trying to manipulate people and our lives, and ultimately God, into bringing about some preconceived idea of what happiness would look like. And then this other vision that I think Jesus portrays so brilliantly of being present to your life and recognizing God in the birds and in the open field and in a friend and in a human being, in a stranger. Finding God in the simplicity of our lives. And that's where God has always been. And He'll still be there, even if you turn Him into an idol for a phase, or if you get upset that, things aren't going right in your life. I understand that's so devastating. But all the suffering is worth realizing that God wants to know us in a very personal way, not just give us things and not just guide us to some future. He wants to know us. And whether you identify as a Christian or as someone who is secular or believes in other religions, my hope would be that this song would bring you into a fresh perspective of the death and resurrection of Christ. When it first started having an impact on my life was when I completely just surrendered everything I had ever heard about the story. And I said, God, I don't care what other people have told me. I don't care what I think that Jesus is up to or who I think He is. You can look around our culture and there's a lot of pre-crucifixion Christians. And I don't judge them anymore because I realize that everyone's on this journey of faith, and this death of self is such a profoundly traumatic and difficult process that we have to go through. As you seek God, you will find that in His mercy, He will let you down sometimes. And anything that represents suffering, if you pick up that and bear that willingly, it will transform you, because you'll come out on the other side a lover of the divine presence that emanates through all things and animates our beings. And when you're in that space, in that intimacy, it really does feel eternal, and there's a kingdom, there's a place we can go beyond time. It's outside of space, and yet it's your life. It's as simple as that. It's nothing different than exactly how things are. And I'm so happy to have the relationship I do with Jesus, and I really hope people can see Him in a new light and enjoy just a fraction of the peace and love and hope that man through his life has inspired within me. Thank you so much for all of you who waited to the very end and listened to this whole thing. That means so much to me. I'm so excited to release new music, and there's a lot more stories to be told and more memories to be made with friends. And so stay slow. May blessing bloom all around you in this season.